Hello there, everyone. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and today I will present you with episode number 23 of the weekly Ratchet. In this episode, we're going to talk about board games, namely our most and least favorite, and we're going to do that with comments from 24 viewers.
It's the weekly Ratchet.
In case you ever wonder, what will Jeff do for a laugh? Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Weekly Ratchet. I am your host, Jeff. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for watching. It's been a crazy week, and I know I just did a Ratchet a little less than a week ago. Of course, coming back from Dice Tower East, it has been a pretty crazy and busy week and weekend here in Ashland, Virginia. Actually, Saturday I had a huge gaming day with Daniel and another friend, and then Sunday we went to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg for the first time. I'd never been there. My family had been there once before, but it was nice, except for it was 92 degrees with like 105 heat index, so we were not there as long as we wanted to be. But hey, it has been a busy week. Lots of games to talk about, lots of things to talk about. 24 comments for the question of the week. I'm looking forward to getting into that. So let's go ahead and kick things off with recently acquired games. All right, I can slide my little table here next to me. First up for newly acquired games is Handful of Stars. This is by Martin Wallace. I believe this is a 2015 game. I could be mistaken, but it's an older game. And this is a space-themed deck-building game from Martin Wallace. This was actually recommended by J.W. Spiker over on the Dice Tower channel during my 2211 of the top 100 games. And I think that was about where I have Rocket Men, another space-themed deck-building game from Martin Wallace that I really enjoy. So he recommended this game. It doesn't look as attractive, I guess, as Rocket Men. It's certainly not as, sort of new. It doesn't have that modern sheen of gaming, if you will. The other thing is that I have a couple of unplayed Martin Wallace games. I'm not a huge Martin Wallace fan. I don't like brass at all, but I have Automobile, which does look like it uses some brass mechanisms, and I also have Onward to Venus sitting over here that I don't even remember. I think I got it off of one of the Dice Tower top 100s in there somewhere a while back, and I need to get all three of these played. So I'm hoping I can check this one out. This does look fairly heavy, as I recall seeing on BGG. That's one of the reasons why I picked it up. I got this off of Noble Knight for a decent price, and it's in pretty good shape. I haven't even lifted the lid off of this thing yet, though. I should probably do that. Anyways, that's Handful of Stars. And speaking of Martin Wallace, this is the expansion to Anno 1800, Die Erweiterung. I believe that is the airships, definitely an airship expansion, as you can tell here from the cover. And that was one of the DLCs for the Anno 1800 video game, which I never really got into in the video game. So this is from Germany, obviously. We don't know if this is going to be available in the US. My good buddy Daniel, who I've mentioned many times, ordered this off of Amazon, either Denmark or Amazon Germany, I'm not quite sure, and basically picked up two copies, one for him, one for me. This has a solo campaign, which you can also get off of BGG as kind of a print and play, but this actually adds the official components. I didn't love the solo game when I played it. I did the print and play version, the first two missions, sort of, if you will. I didn't really care for it. It was supposed to follow the campaign of the video game, but it did that in a way that I felt made the game much more luck dependent on the cards that you're drawing from the workers deck or whatever they're called. So I didn't really like it, but Daniel started a little later in that campaign. He kind of skipped the first few games, which you can do, really doesn't really matter, and he has really quite enjoyed it. So I'm gonna have to check this out. Interested in seeing what the airships adds. And I really like Anno 1800. Again, it was on my top 100. The problem with this one is that it's really long to play. Even as a two-player game, it really does take a bit too long. But I still enjoy the way it sort of tackles city building. And I apologize, I think I'm glaring all over the screen here because this is in shrink wrap. So I will put this out of frame. Anno 1800. That is it for newly acquired games. Let's get to question of the week. Lots to get through here for question of the week. I challenged folks last week to break the record of about 11 or 12 comments each week, and we shattered that for sure with 24 unique answers to the question of the week, which was, by the way, name your most favorite and least favorite board game. This was kind of a follow-up to my Top 100 series over on the Dice Tower, and lots of comments to get through, so let me go ahead and get to it. Up first was Wonderflonium, who said his favorite was Age of Innovation, and his least favorite was Time Stories, Madame. I have not played either of these. I've played the precursor to Age of Innovation, which was Gaia Project, and I have not gotten through the Time Stories. I know that I think it's kind of a campaignish kind of a game. I don't think it is a legacy game, but I could be incorrect. It's one of those things I want to check out, but I know I'm not going to be able to get through the whole thing, and so I've just kind of not made it a priority. I do know that the last Time Stories, I think, was really an upsetting game to a lot of people. Something about it was really wonky. Anyways, those are Wonderfloniums. C.R. Pohl said his favorite was probably Ticket to Ride, and then said that his least favorite was, quote, the one where you are planting trees and trying to get them to follow the sun, end quote. He mentioned that that was a game that I had mentioned on my Top 100. I'm guessing that was Evergreen, C.R. Pohl, not exactly sure. He did also go on to say that basically any game that is 4X is not his favorite. And he has mentioned in the past that he is a lighter gamer, and I can certainly understand that. Wayne Kruger said his favorite was Castles of Burgundy, and his least was probably Cosmic Encounter, as he could not recall a good experience with it. Now, I've played Castles of Burgundy just once, and I think that is the only Stefan Feld game I have ever played. I have not played Cosmic Encounter. It's a game that I'd like to really try. I've certainly heard enough about it over the years, and I can certainly tell you it's not my kind of game, as I know there's a lot of negotiation and backstabbing and, you know, that kind of stuff. Hopefully someday I can check it out, maybe at a retreat sometime, but certainly not something that I'm really eager to, you know, table, because I just don't think it's going to work for me either. Katie of the Meeple Society said that her favorite was Terraforming Mars, and her least favorite game is Killer Bunnies, the only game she ever got mad at. Which is weird, because I can remember her getting mad at Greg at a lot of games that we all played. There was also the traffic jam at London Cabbie that sure ticked you off a bit. And speaking of which, Greg of the Meeple Society said his favorite is Firefly, and his least favorite is Agricola, as it simply frustrates him. Yeah, I only ever played Agricola once with a physical copy, which I had, and I think I've actually gotten rid of it. You know, I like worker placement games. I like sort of that little bit of an engine building element in Agricola, but I could just never figure out the right process through that game. And of course, I always get starved out of the actions I need to take on the market, which is also very similar to Brewcrafters, which is kind of modeled after Agricola, but I like way better because I feel like it's a bit more flexible than Agricola, at least in some regards. Anyways, Canuck Chuck kind of dodged the question, but instead discussed how challenging it is to play games when you're mentally drained after a long day of work. And that sparked some interesting conversation there on that comment thread, which was neat to see. And I can certainly understand that. Now, you know, I certainly have days where I'm too tired to game myself. For me, of course, it is such a big thing for me with the show and the Dice Tower stuff. So I'm generally kind of always thinking about gaming. I'm always looking forward to gaming. I know, especially for my wife, she can have those times where it's, you know, just, no, I'm too tired, I don't want to play. But, you know, it's not as high of a hobby, you know, for her as far as priorities go. But I can certainly understand that. I think for me, I like gaming as a bit of an escape from reality and all the other stuff going on. So that's kind of why, even after those longer days, sometimes I can still, you know, maybe pull out something a little lighter. In fact, I've got one game coming up here we can chat about as a nice light game that you can play. You don't really have to overthink, and you can still just kind of relax a little bit and have some fun. And I would look for, you know, those what they call chill games or relaxing games. Parks is a pretty good one. I'm thinking of another nature game. Earth is a little too involved. Earth is not a good example, but there's a couple. Number 9 is a pretty good one where you don't really have to think too hard about it. Planet, I think that's what I'm thinking of. Planet, you can just kind of play fairly quickly. It's pretty chill. You're not really all that stressed playing it, even if you're not doing that great. It's just a nice sort of a tactile experience. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that one. Moving on, Kay said that her favorite game is Lords of Waterdeep with the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion, and her least favorite game is Patchwork. You know, Kay, we have got to get some games played. I have not gotten to play Lords of Waterdeep, and I'm not a huge fan of polyomino games, and so though Patchwork came out at a time that I was still very new in gaming and wanted to play everything, that was just one that I never got a chance to play. And then kind of by the time that opportunity came up, I don't really like polyomino games anymore, so I just never sat down to it. But I can certainly understand on that polyomino game. Up next is Juan Pablo Pagan, or Pagan, apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly, a first-time poster who said his favorite game is Castles of Burgundy and Star Trek Frontiers. Cheated with that whole 2 games thing, that's okay. And his least favorite was Photosynthesis because it was a little too much like chess. And that's kind of funny because I actually likened Photosynthesis to chess when I did a review of it out on the Dice Tower channel quite a while ago. And I do think that is the element of that game that throws people off, because it looks like this very pretty game, and yet it is a very almost cutthroat tactical game. I do like Photosynthesis, but I can certainly understand some of the comments that I've seen from folks who don't care for it, and that's one of the reasons why. Thanks you so much for the comment, Juan. Rentless said his favorite is Master of Orion, and his least favorite is Atlantis, the one by Cleo Colavini. Now, I had to look up both of these games. I had not heard of either of them. Actually, I think I did hear of Atlantis. I think it even came up once in a game trade, but I looked at some pictures of it and just thought, nah, that doesn't look like the kind of game I would be interested in. I did look at Master of Orion. I didn't know that that was even a video game that the board game is based off of. I will only say this, Master of Orion is definitely one of those games where the cover, which looks fantastic, does not look anything like the game itself. And I was almost kind of a little taken back. We've seen certainly games like this throughout the hobby where the cover just does not match the experience of the game itself, or just the setting of the box does not really line up with the setting of the game as it sits on your table. But anyways, it does still kind of look neat. Looks like there's a lot of stuff going on in this, and I'd be up for checking that one out. Tony Lawhorn said that his favorite is Federation, and his least favorite is Stowaway. Now, I had to look up Stowaway. There's only 2 games on all of Board Game Geek with the word Stowaway in it. Neither of them look very popular, so I think you're not alone in that one. Federation was one that has caught my attention. I think I was even eyeing that one up at Gen Con last year, but this has really been described as a very heavy tracks game. Lots of different tracks you're trying to go up, lots of economy stuff you're dealing with. I think there's even sort of a stock market element, if I recall, and those things really just aren't my go-to in gaming. So I've kind of avoided Federation for those reasons, but that's just my personal take, of course. Ace Z Brat said his favorite was Ground Floor 2nd Edition, and he did not give a least favorite. I had to check out Ground Floor. I hadn't heard of that one either. And I'll tell you what, the box on that one does not look very interesting, but the board kind of does. This is a pretty neat looking game. Obviously urban construction type idea of a game. Looks interesting. I had to try and check this one out, although I have no idea where I would even get a chance to play it. I have not seen this anywhere. But thanks for that. Thanks for that sort of recommendation. I'd like to check that one out. Thomas Grieve said his favorite was Wonderland's War, and his least favorite is Hot Shots, which he called a random, frustrating mess. I can certainly understand those types of games. Wonderland's War, I am aware of. I've seen it played. Actually, it's been played right here on this table, not by me. I was at the table behind playing. Actually, I think I was playing Brass Birmingham. But I can tell you just based on the bag building and sort of that random draw, and I know that was a little bit more like Quacks, and that you can pull bad things out of your bag and you kind of get caught, off guard. I don't think it's going to be my type of game. I also know it's really, really long to play, and I think that an element that I don't like to play on a really, really long game is just a bad combination for me. So I've kind of avoided that one. I don't know anything about Hot Shots. So I'll have to look up that one. Simulation Chris said his favorite is Battlestar Galactica, which he doesn't own, and so he rarely gets to play. And his least favorite is Monopoly. There it is. Good old Monopoly. I have also not played or ever watched Battlestar Galactica. And isn't that one of those hidden that's sort of like a hidden agenda. You've got like you've got one versus many kind of a thing, where someone's kind of the bad guy and no one knows who it is. Interesting concept. I've just never really played a game like that. Ryan Combs, a first-time poster, said that his favorite is Root by Leader Games, and his least favorite is Lore. Now, I looked up Lore very briefly, couldn't really tell a whole lot about it on a quick glance. So I know Root. Root is, I think, a great game, not my kind of game just because of the way that the conflict works and the way that it can be quite random as well, which is really a sort of a staple of Leader Games, I think, the more and more I get familiar with them. But thanks for the comment, Ryan. Slacker Joe, another first-time poster, said his favorite is Go, an ancient, I believe, Chinese game, and his least favorite was Fallout. What a slog that was, he said. Joe, also very nice to meet you. Glad I could teach you guys Caldera Park, even though you challenged my authority a little bit in that one, if I recall. But that was pretty funny. I watched the Shut Up and Sit Down video on Go. I would love to try out Go, but I still can't figure out how the heck it works. I think I'd have to kind of see it played and sort of get like a hands-on teach of how it works, because I think I would just goof up too many rules. But it looks neat, and we even have like a little miniature version of it, like a travel version of it, but I just have not tried to figure that one out. Anyways, thanks for the comment, Joe. Carl Tunis said his favorite was King Domino, and his least is Risk, especially when it drags out too long. I've talked about Risk in a couple different videos in a couple different places, one being a Dice Tower review of, what was that game? I think I got rid of it. No, DEF CON was the game. I have one really terrible experience with Risk and a fairly positive experience with Risk, and I've decided to leave it there and basically never play that game again. So I can understand that. Omar Hernandez said his favorite is Beyond the Sun, and his least was Tidal Blade's Banner Festival, because it felt like he felt like it had no agency and was kind of a slog, even though it wasn't really too long. Agree with you 100%. I played Banner Festival at the retreat either a year or two ago. I can't recall. And I felt the same way. I felt like I could not get anything done that I wanted to do. And it wasn't too long of a game, and yet it was, because I was just kind of ready for it to be over. I just didn't really feel like... I didn't feel like it was a game worth playing. I really didn't. Beyond the Sun, I have definitely warmed up to. That one made the top 100, which it would not have done a year or so ago, thanks to some plays with Daniel and getting that review made out on the Dice Tower channel for the expansion, which was okay. But I did warm up to Beyond the Sun a good bit. Andrew Gelling, another first-time poster, said his favorite was Cthulhu Death May Die, and his least favorite was Betrayal at House on the Hill, which he said, quote, I imagine I don't even have to explain why, end quote. Nope, no idea. I have no idea. I have not played either of these. I do believe that both of them are kind of in that Cthulhu theme, if I recall, and I just have zero interest in Cthulhu or any of that kind of stuff. I didn't even know what it was until a handful of years ago, and it's just not my kind of thing. But I know that both of those games are somewhat fairly popular, at least in their own camps, but I don't know either of them, so I can't weigh in. But thanks for the comment, Andrew. Jamie Wiley said his favorite was Flashpoint Fire Rescue, and his least favorite was Munchkin. Doesn't really matter which, pretty much any of them. Agree 100%. I played Munchkin last year for the first time at a game night. In fact, I was with a colleague. We went to a game store first to kill some time. She picked up Munchkin, base game, if I recall, and then broke it out at the game night that we ended up going to. I sat through 2 rounds of it. I leveled up in the first round and was completely dead by the second round. And they said, well, you're supposed to like respawn, but you have to lose something. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to go ahead and be dead and not come back into this absolutely terrible, terrible game. So I can agree on that one. And I have Flashpoint Fire Rescue sitting right there. I can see it. Never played it. Need to get that played. The co-op is just not something that I gravitate towards myself, but it does look pretty neat. Thanks for the comment. Up next is Teshera, another first-time poster. Thanks for commenting, who said his favorite is Lord of the Rings card game. Absolutely awesome at 2. And that the least favorite was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective because it was, quote, too loose of a system. It made you feel bad for not making the Herculean references the designers thought Sherlock would have made. I thought that was a good comment. I've certainly seen those kinds of games where like, how are you supposed to figure this out? How did they think that you were supposed to figure this out? What the hell were they thinking with this game? So I certainly understand. Thank you for the comment. DBNCR, aka Derek, first-time poster, welcome, said his favorite was Zombicide Black Plague, and his least, or dreaded in his words, was Kittens in a Blender. I think I know I've heard of that game. I don't think I've ever seen it, and I certainly haven't played it, and I think I would probably avoid it just because of that title alone. I love cats. And I'm sure it's a playful, silly game, but yeah, I think I'm going to stay away from that one. Good to see you, Derek. Thanks for joining. And Opelica Crush, a.k.a. Missy, who I also met at Dice Tower East, a first-time poster, said her favorites are Wormspan and Apiary because she is a Stonemaier fan, and didn't list a least, but said that she also enjoyed Harmonies, but hoped that it was taught to her properly. And I know for a fact that you had a world-class teacher of that game, taught by an absolute master of board game teaching. What a legend. I'm sure he was. Good to see you, Missy. Dan Cheston said his favorite was Fields of Arle, and least favorite was Christmas Lights, because it's basically like Hanabi but competitive. Who thought that this would spread Christmas cheer? Actually, I have not even played that game. I bought it last year. Actually, I think I bought it really early this year. Sort of right after the holiday season, I was able to get it fairly cheap. I've been looking for, some nice Christmas-themed games. I don't want a whole bunch of them, but it'd be nice to have a couple. And someone, I think, on the Dice Tower recommended that. It was like on a top 100 or a top 10 Christmas game, something like that. But it's funny you say that because I don't like Hanabi either. I did read the rules for it, and I know there's that kind of blind drafting sort of a thing where you can't see what you have, but you can see what opponents have, and I think you're taking their stuff. I don't know. So yeah, now you made me a little worried about playing that one. Then again, I haven't tried it, so I'm probably not really missing out. And lastly, Mary Beth Boyd, who I know for a fact lives about 2 miles from me and is also a first-time poster, said her favorite is Lisboa and Arkham Horror, and her least favorite is Monopoly. Mary Beth, as I mentioned, I'm not really into the horror stuff or the Cthulhu stuff. I think Arkham Horror is, again, in that theme. I have not played Lisboa, but I really, really need to get it played. I'm a big fan of Lacerda games, and so I think you and I will probably have no problem finding some common gaming interests, and I hope we can get a game event put together here fairly soon. Thanks, everyone, for the comments. As I mentioned in my top 100, my number one game is The Age of Atlantis by Eldorado Games. Just absolutely love that game. And if I had to think of a least favorite, I think my least favorite game is probably Pax Pamir, which is by Cole Worley, who also did a lot of the leader games like Arcs, which right now is very, very popular. And as I understand, there's a lot of similarities between Arcs and Pax Pamir, which is why I will probably not really be pushing to play Arcs anytime soon. Okay, so moving on to next question of the week. I had to give this one a little bit of thought. I actually had to go through all of my older episodes and kind of remember what I've already asked, so I wouldn't ask it again. And I think I came up with a decent one. If you could change something about board gaming in your own life, your own sort of experience with the board gaming hobby, what would you change? Whether it be number of friends you could play with, or number of games you had, or maybe it's a specific game you'd love to get, just something that you would love to be a little different when it came to you in board gaming, let me know in the comments. Again, sort of a, open, nebulous subject. I thought maybe with so many people here joining in, we could have some nice, interesting conversation. That is the question for next week, and now we're going to get to some recently played games. So this week I got to play actually quite a handful of games, almost as many as I played at Dice Tower East. That's the good news. The bad news is that a lot of these I have talked about already, although there are a couple of new ones in here. Up first, when I got back from Dice Tower East, I was craving some familiar scenes and some familiar beers. And so we went back to Center of the Universe here in Ashland, and I brought Outer Space, the Galaxy, Outer Space, the Galaxy Building card game. This is a very nice, light, not really too thinky card game, sort of almost like tile laying, but with cards, and you're simply trying to create different, scoring opportunities for you on each of your turns. Very simple, very quick. In fact, I think we played 2 games. My wife was chatting with one of the bartenders who we know, and so my daughter and I were all set up. I was like, well, screw it, we're just going to play the 2 of us. And by the time we were done, my wife had just gotten back to the table. We sat back up and played a second time real quick. I won the first game, and I think my wife won the second one. Again, just a great game. I really enjoy this. I'd love to see some other scoring opportunities for it, but it's a fine game as it is. Outer Space. Then on Thursday, I had some friends join me here, and we played the new Pampero by Julian Pombo. Now, I've got an older review of this out here on the channel. I think I mentioned last week when this game came in, and I went into this playthrough with some trepidation because I know that I had some issues with it back in 22, and I also knew that he had changed nothing in this game. Was basically just quite bulwark, if you will, on keeping things the way it was so just passionate of his own design that he wasn't really listening to any criticisms or concerns about the game, which is a little annoying, if I'm honest, but actually had a decent playthrough with this. There are still some clunky elements to this game. For example, when you build a wind turbine or a transmission tower, both of which you kind of need to have to advance throughout the game, you have a little bulldozer that you can move to another area, but it has to be adjacent to your current area, and if the adjacent areas are basically full, then you have to go off to this side parking lot, and then later on you can play a card to move that bulldozer again, but that card is immensely expensive, and I can't really understand why it's so difficult to be able to build somewhere that you need to build at. And it also has this system, and I mentioned it back in 2022, is that when you're playing cards to take actions, and it's kind of like Concordia in that you basically, the cards stay out, and then you can take a action to pick all your cards back up. But in a game like Concordia, you get a little reward for doing that, right? You make a couple of bucks. In this game, you don't get anything, and you move on a time track. And if every player does that at least once in the game gets a round shorter. And so, for example, we all thought we had one more round, 3 actions that we were going to be able to take to get some last minute things done. And we didn't, because Mike, one of our players, had to pick up all of his cards. He advanced his token. He basically triggered the end game because the other 2 of us had already done that. And that was the end of the game. Which was, we were all kind of like, oh, crap. We thought we were going to be able to do one more thing. Anyways, overall, though, I did like the play of it. I do still like some of its elements in this sort of wind power theme. He gets some things right, and I did enjoy the playthrough more than I thought that I would. We didn't try out the new, I believe it's called Clear Skies expansion. I didn't want to try and throw out more than what I needed to for this playthrough. And it was okay, and I do want to try this one out a little bit more. My opinions on it have improved a little bit. Pampero. Let's see. Later on that week, actually, it may have been maybe Friday night, my wife and I played Path of Civilization. I've mentioned this one, got this one at Dice Tower East. This is a somewhat abstract civilization game. The downside of it being that it uses all AI art, but the plus side being that it's actually a pretty decent game. If you can kind of get past the art thing, and I think that this is a relatively small designer and a very small publishing company, I have to kind of wonder if without that aspect of AI art, if this game would have ever been able to see the light of day. And I think that's something that's kind of worth considering, but not for today. I did enjoy this playthrough. I do enjoy this game. I kind of played it like I've played it the first time, which was I just sort of went a little heavy into the military, scoring a lot of points throughout the game, and I managed to win, although I didn't have as high of a score as I had at the demo at Dice Tower East. And I'm going to talk more about this in just a moment. So I'm going to move on. Then came Saturday. Daniel came over. We had a game day. We were joined at midday with another friend. And so first off, we played Radlands. This was early Saturday morning. I mentioned this also at Dice Tower East. And I tell you, when I recap this in my Dice Tower East video, which is here on the channel, I mentioned that I soon realized I was playing with the 4th place world champion, a gentleman by the name of Mark, who of course cleaned the floor with me. When I played it with Daniel over the weekend, we had a much more tense game. We both had some interesting sort of synergies. He had some really strong cards that came out that really knocked me back. I really felt against the ropes for a bit. I did not think I had a chance in this game. I managed to claw my way back. I managed to kind of stand a couple people back up and sort of rejuvenate myself a little bit. and won. I couldn't believe it. Came back just clawing to life and managed to win this game. It was neat. I don't know a lot of people that I could play this with. It is a very take that game. It can really get a little frustrating when you just keep getting pounded. He had a particular card that just got to just wipe out my group twice, and it was just so difficult. Although when I got those hits on him, boy, each one felt so rewarding. But definitely a neat game, and I do appreciate what it does. Up next, we played New Frontiers with the Starry Rift expansion. I've mentioned this one before. Daniel had not played the board game version of this. Love this game. Really have a lot of fun with this one. And I also kind of went with my common tactic of just really building up my military. Had a hugely powerful military at the end of this game and won this one fairly handily. Great game. New Frontiers. Then we played... Cascadia and the Cascadia Landmarks expansion. I haven't played Cascadia in a while, and I had not tried Landmarks. I had just picked this one up, 2 weeks or so ago. I think I mentioned I'd purchased this one. That's when we were down in Georgia, a couple weeks ago. The Landmarks expansion adds basically two things. It adds a whole bunch of tiles that you can just add into the base game. It also adds some new scoring cards for the animals that you just add into the base game. You don't need the expansion. It just, in fact, what we found interesting, I had forgotten that the Cascadia tiles have two biomes on them, unless it is the, not the landmark tiles. What are those tiles called? The keystone tiles. That if you put the proper animal on that tile, you get like a little pine cone and you can use it as a wild thing later on. Anyways, the tiles, the regular tiles in the game are sort of two-sided or two-edged, if you will, in that they have two different biomes. So you may have mountains and wetlands on the same tile, split down the middle. So basically they're hexagonal tiles. 3 edges are mountain and 3 edges are wetland. In the expansion, it sort of changes that to like a 60-40, something like that. So you've got 4 edges that are one biome and only 2 that are the others. And that can make it both easier and harder to build the path of different environments that then score at the end of the game. Now, we didn't really use those. I just didn't feel like trying to shuffle all these things together, but we did use the new Landmarks expansion, which adds these wooden landmark little tokens and some cards. You have a number of cards per player for each of the, 6 different environments in the game. And when you build a continuous group of 5 of any of those environments, you then choose from the available cards, and that becomes another end game scoring opportunity for you, which could also, give you something else to try and work towards. And boy, does it ever make this game a good bit thinky. It definitely ramps up the complexity of this, especially as you start to pick up 4, 5, or 6 of these different landmark cards, and you're trying to go for the animal scoring cards and your landmark scoring cards, and you suddenly find yourself quite stressed. In addition, when you take that landmark token and you place it, you have to place it on the last tile that you just played, and you cannot then place an animal on that card, and so you have to even then think about, okay, I'm going to take this, but then I can't score the animal, so you have to really make sure that the tile that you're putting there is not a tile that you need for other scoring opportunities. And like I said, we were a little sore in the brain by the time we finished with this game. It was a neat experience. I certainly enjoyed it. I would have to say that Landmarks probably puts this game back in the lead for me as far as this trilogy of Calico and Cascadia and Verdant. Verdant made my top 100. I think that with Landmarks could put this one back higher than Verdant. So that was pretty neat. Cascadia, Landmarks. Let's see, then we played, we took a quick lunch, and then we came back, another friend joined us, and we played Solarium. This is from Tassin Sharma. I mentioned this last week with the Dice Tower East episode. This is a 4X space game with deck building as its core mechanic. Now, where to start with this one? I'm going to try not to go into this in too much detail for now. For one thing, I need to play it again because I found out after the fact that we goofed a couple of rules. One particular that actually gave me quite an advantage that I probably should not have had, which is a bit of a bummer. And I'll tell you why. Because this game is very, very, very volatile. It's very, very fast-paced. Your turns are fairly quick. You got a lot that you can do. But what I found frustrating was that you kind of have this open universe. You have all these different sectors. You have planets kind of all over the place. Excuse me. And I had a turn where, okay, I started to move into a neighboring sector. I was kind of trying to, set up a new foothold in a new tile. And another player came in. His name was Ricky. He came in and wiped out a couple of my ships and kind of knocked me back and left his dreadnought sitting there in the system. And that kind of, teed me just a little bit. So on my next turn, I managed to build up some more ships, moved him back in, knocked out his dreadnought, maybe built one more colony on a planet while I was there. Ha! All right, take that, Ricky. Except that on his next turn, he built more ships, moved them into that sector, took out the ships I just put in there. Okay, so then I built more ships, and I moved them in there, and I took out his ships, and, and it was like that for like the next 8 rounds, just constantly back and forth. And I quickly ended up calling it the yo-yo. It just felt like it was, I would throw it down and then it came right back up. And I'd throw it down again and then it came up. And it was really starting to get frustrating because you just kind of felt like it was just the same thing over and over and over again. Now it is kind of nice when you start popping opponent ships. You can get some points. But of course he was getting the points right back. Meanwhile, Daniel was kind of off in his own sector of the universe, just expanding all over the place. And I kept telling Ricky, look, we got to do something about Daniel, but we just keep duking it out over this one system that isn't even really worth that many points. And I liked the flexibility of it, but I also felt like it was a little too flexible. A lot of your 4X games will say things like, okay, once these ships move, they can't move again. Once they've had combat, they can't fight again. Or maybe they can't move after they fought. There's all those kind of overhead, almost like flypaper type rules where the games try to keep people from being able to do too much in too short a period of time. And this game is the exact opposite. You can build a ship and then just send it around the galaxy like a wrecking ball if you have enough command points in a turn to do so, which I did, but I did only because we got a rule wrong. So I need to try this out again. I respected what it did. It's maybe just not my kind of game. Apparently it's based on another game which does a lot of that same stuff. It's a very, very fast-paced, kind of a loose, open-ended game. You can kind of do whatever you want. And I almost wonder if maybe I need a little bit more of that sort of, gate checking to just make sure that a player cannot just take off on a single turn. Neat idea. Need to try it out some more. Solarian. Let me see. Then we played Path of Civilization again. I tried a different strategy in this, having played it just recently, and got the lowest score I'd ever gotten in the game. I did not focus on the military track. I tried to focus on a bunch of other things that I really don't do that well in the game, and I lost quite badly. That was kind of a bummer, but it is neat to see that even though it seems very straightforward and abstract, there are a bunch of different ways of playing Path of Civilization. And then the last game that we played was the Firefly 10th anniversary game. We took this lovely picture for Greg of the Meeple Society. And I tell you what, I still like Firefly. I do. I enjoy the game. But this was definitely a playthrough where it showed what it can be, and that it can also be a very random and sometimes frustrating experience. On one of my turns, I picked up the Kaylee character, the engineer from the show. I then started to move across space, drew the wrong card from the navigation deck. A Reaver appeared right in my same sector and killed off Kaylee. That was a bummer. I then kind of regrouped a little bit. I got across to another area of space. I picked up a mission which required me to load a little bit of contraband, which is, a little bit of a risky thing to do. And on that very same turn, my very next action, moved one sector across space, drew the wrong card from the nav deck, in came the Alliance cruiser and confiscated my contraband and just set me back. Would have taken several turns to sort of recover from that. And thankfully on her next turn, my wife won the game. And I was like, great, perfect, sounds good. As I packed everything up and stuffed the game off to the side. I think it's still sitting on a table behind me, but I don't think you can. No, you can't see it. Anyways, that was Firefly 10th anniversary. That was my game day on Saturday, and that is the end of the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you so much again for watching. I really appreciate all your comments. Thank you so much for everyone who joined into the Ratchet this episode. Keep it up, keep coming. Stick around and share some more of your thoughts here on the Ratchet. I'd love to hear from you. I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a good week. Cheers.